The house we'd rented for the weekend was a forgotten relic perched on the edge of the desert, an old, decaying villa that once belonged to some long-dead oil tycoon. A couple of friends and I had driven out there from Dubai, eager to escape the city and indulge in some peace, cheap booze, and a bit of weed. Yeah, the locals had warned us. They always do. That place is cursed, the gas station attendant said, shaking his head like an old sage, his eyes narrow. The Djinn don't like being disturbed. We laughed it off. We were young, drunk on our own sense of invincibility, and ready for a wild weekend. Curses. Djinn. Just folklore. Stuff our grandmothers would tell us when we were kids, right? The villa looked the part, though. It was a crumbling beast of a building, with wine-scorched walls and windows that yawned like empty eye sockets. As we unpacked the car, sand whipped around us, stinging our skin, and the wind howled through the broken shutters, making a sound like someone whispering a long-forgotten prayer. Spooky as hell, Daniel joked, lighting up a joint. But hey, perfect for a horror movie. If only we knew. By sunset, we'd already cracked open half the beer supply and were lounging around the grand, decaying sitting room, where old portraits glared at us from dusty, crooked frames. There were 6 of us, me, Daniel, his girlfriend Emily, Farah, Sam and Jen. We were loud, drunk, and stupid, which is probably why we didn't notice the first signs. It started with the whispering. Faint, like the wind brushing through the hallways, but it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Farah paused, her beer halfway to her lips. "Did you guys hear that?" she asked, her brows furrowing. "Hear what?" Sam slurred, already 3 shots deep and giggling at nothing. Farah shook her head. "Never mind. Probably the wind." But the whispering didn't stop. It grew louder, circling the room, almost like someone was chanting in a language that twisted and bent in ways the human tongue shouldn't be able to. The air felt thicker, charged, and my skin prickled with an unnatural chill. "Cut the bullshit," Emily snapped, glaring at Jen, who had a reputation for playing pranks. "It's not funny." Jen raised his hands, looking just as uneasy as the rest of us. "It's not me, I swear." A heavy thud echoed from upstairs, making us all jump. It sounded like something heavy had been dragged across the floor. The laughter died out, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. "Maybe an animal got in," I suggested, though my voice sounded weak, even to me. Farah hugged her knees, her dark eyes wide. "Or maybe the Djinn got tired of listening to your dumbass jokes." She was half joking, but there was fear in her voice. The kind of fear you feel deep in your gut. Another thud. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Coming down the hallway from the second floor. We all stared at the staircase, waiting, holding our breath. The footsteps stopped at the top, and for a moment, there was only the whispering echoing from every fucking direction. Then a voice called out, deep and guttural, dripping with malice. It spoke in a language I didn't understand, but I could feel the hate, the rage radiating from it. Emily screamed, clutching Daniel's arm, and Jan swore, backing up so fast he nearly tripped over a broken table. "Who the fuck is up there?" Sam shouted, trying to sound brave, but his voice cracked. The whispering stopped. The air grew thick, pressing in around us like a suffocating blanket. And then, something moved at the top of the stairs, a shadow, too large, too misshapen, stretching across the wall. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its eyes, oh fuck, its eyes glowed a deep, hellish red, like embers in the dark. And it fucking laughed. A deep, rumbling laugh that made my knees buckle. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, Jan muttered, stumbling backward. The shadow lunged, and the room erupted into chaos. Daniel grabbed Emily and ran, but the front door slammed shut with a force that cracked the wood. I yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. My hands slipped, slick with sweat and panic. Open, fucking open. I screamed, but the door stayed closed. Farah was crying, clutching her necklace, a small, silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Her lips moved silently, reciting some prayer or verse, but it didn't help. The room grew colder, and the lights began to flicker. Then, the blood started. Thick, dark rivulets dripping down the walls, oozing from the cracks in the ceiling. It stank of iron and rot, making me gag. The whispering returned, louder now, a chant that echoed through my skull, drilling into my brain. I turned and saw Sam standing in the middle of the room, frozen, his eyes wide and mouth slack. Sam? I called, but he didn't move. Blood trickled from his nose, and he fell to his knees, choking. His skin turned pale, his veins blackening, spreading like poison. The air shimmered around him, and I watched in horror as his body twisted, bones snapping and rearranging. Fucking help him. Daniel shouted, but none of us moved. We were paralyzed, rooted in place by the sheer wrongness of what was happening. Sam's eyes rolled back, his mouth opening in a silent scream, and then he crumpled, like a marionette with its strings cut. No. Farah screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the guttural laughter that filled the room. Then the fucking thing emerged from the shadows. It wasn't human. It never had been. Its body was tall and emaciated, skin stretched tight over bone, its limbs twisted like broken branches. Its face, God, that face, was a grotesque mask, with hollow sockets where eyes should have been and a mouth filled with jagged, broken teeth. It stared at us, grinning, and whispered in that language again, a voice that sounded like rusted metal scraping against stone. Emily collapsed, clutching her head, blood trickling from her ears. Get out of my head, she screamed, but the thing only laughed, moving closer. Jen finally snapped, grabbing a bottle of whiskey and hurling it at the creature. It shattered, and for a moment, the gin flickered, like a dying flame. It wasn't hurt, but it was pissed. It turned to Jan, lifting a hand, and Jan's body flew backward, slamming into the wall with a sickening crunch. He didn't get back up. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Daniel screamed, swinging the rifle, but it was useless. The gin moved, a blur of shadows and hate, and Daniel's body was thrown across the room, crashing into a rotting bookshelf. I grabbed Farah, dragging her toward the back door. It was our only shot. The chanting grew louder, and the air buzzed with static, making my teeth ache. We reached the door, but before I could open it, something cold and clawed wrapped around my ankle, yanking me to the ground. I screamed, kicking out, and saw Emily. Or what was left of her. Her eyes were black voids, her mouth twisted into that same jagged grin, and blood poured from her lips. She whispered something in that twisted language, her voice echoing in my skull, and I felt my vision blur. No, I gasped, clawing at the floor. Farah, run. Farah hesitated, her eyes wild with terror, but then she bolted, reciting her prayer louder, her voice cracking. Emily, or the thing that had once been Emily, let me go, turning its attention to Farah. I staggered to my feet, my body shaking. I had to do something. Anything. I grabbed the broken whiskey bottle, clenching it so hard the glass bit into my palm, and lunged at Emily. The glass pierced her neck, and she howled, her voice 1,000 screams layered over each other. The Djinn flickered, its form unraveling, and for a moment I thought we'd won. But then it reformed, towering over me, and I knew we were fucked. It lifted a hand, claws dripping with that same black, oily blood, and whispered something I'll never forget. "You are mine." The room exploded into darkness, and I felt claws sinking into my chest, ripping through muscle and bone. Pain flooded my body, blinding and raw, and I screamed until my throat bled. But then there was a blinding flash of light, and the Djinn recoiled, shrieking. Farah stood in the doorway, her crescent moon pendant clutched tightly in her bleeding hand, tears streaming down her face. The pendant glowed with a pure, searing light, casting sharp, jagged shadows across the decaying walls of the villa. The Djinn recoiled, its form splitting and twisting as if the light was burning it from the inside out. It let out a guttural scream, a sound that vibrated through my bones, and for a moment, the suffocating darkness around us seemed to shudder. "Stay the fuck back!" Farah screamed, her voice a mixture of terror and defiance, as she stumbled forward, the pendant blazing like a star. She whispered a prayer, one I recognized from childhood, one our grandmothers had taught us. The ancient, sacred words cut through the dark like knives, each syllable making the Djinn flicker and waver. I could barely move, pain pulsing through every inch of my body from where the Djinn had clawed into my chest. My vision was a blur of tears, but I could still make out the monstrous silhouette of the Djinn, writhing in agony. It clawed at the air, trying to grasp at something unseen, its glowing red eyes dimming. The thing that had been Emily fell to the floor, her body convulsing, black ichor pouring from her mouth. The Djinn's power was unraveling, but not fast enough. It lunged for Farah, moving like a shadow possessed, and she stumbled backward, her grip on the pendant slipping. "Farah, no." I choked out, forcing myself to my feet. My body screamed in protest, but I didn't give a shit. I grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and charged at the Djinn. I swung with every ounce of strength I had left, the makeshift weapon passing straight through the creature's smoky form. It laughed a cold, dead sound that made my blood freeze. The Djinn swiped at me, its clawed hand grazing my side. Agony bloomed, hot and deep, and I collapsed, gasping for air, my vision swimming. The monster turned back to Farah, ready to finish what it had started. "Please," Farah sobbed, her fingers trembling around the pendant. "I'm begging you, go back." The Djinn paused, as if considering her words, and then its mouth split into that grotesque, too-wide grin. It reached for her, shadows coiling around its skeletal fingers. And then, Farah did something I'll never forget. With a desperate, defiant scream, she pressed the glowing pendant to her own chest, directly over her heart. The light exploded, pure and holy, flooding the entire room. It was so bright that I couldn't see, couldn't think, only feel the intense heat and hear the Djinn's howl of fury as it was torn apart, piece by piece, the sacred light burning it from existence. The shadows twisted, the air screamed, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went quiet. The light faded, and I found myself on the floor, blinking through the tears, my ears ringing. Farah was slumped against the wall, her eyes closed, the pendant dangling from her hand. Blood trickled from her nose, and she looked so pale, so fragile, that my heart nearly stopped. "Farah!" I crawled to her, each movement sending a wave of pain through my body. Farah, wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak, broken smile. Did we win? She whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. I pulled her into my arms, tears streaming down my face. Yeah, I choked out, even though I wasn't sure. We fucking won. Around us, the villa was eerily silent. The blood that had dripped from the walls was gone, the whispers silenced. Emily's body lay still, but there was no more twisted grin, no more black ichor. Just Emily. Broken and gone. Jan and Sam were dead, their bodies twisted and ruined, but the Djinn was gone. The curse lifted. Farah and I were the only ones left, two shattered souls clinging to each other in a house that had nearly swallowed us whole. When we finally stumbled out into the desert dawn, the sky was painted with soft hues of gold and pink, as if mocking the hell we'd just escaped. We were covered in blood, bruised and broken, but we were alive. Barely. We never spoke about what happened that night. Not to anyone. No one would believe us, anyway. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear it, the whispering. I still see those glowing red eyes in my nightmares. And I wonder if we truly won, or if the Djinn is just waiting. Waiting for the right moment to finish what it started. Because curses never really die, do they? And neither do the Djinn.